Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of System Link for Wednesday, the 12th of March, 2025. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Mike Hazelton from the Xbox Guide. Mike, how are we doing?
Yeah, not bad. Bit of a slog this week, but I'm alright. You?
Ready. Feeling very much the same. Ready to dive in. We mentioned this last week, how not having the regularity of being able to unpack the news felt really disruptive to our routines. And we've talked off air as well about this, how we often use our live streams. We're catching up anyway. We just decided to turn a camera onto it. So for those of you that are listening to this on YouTube, on Podbean, on Spotify, we record System Link live every single Wednesday on Twitch over at twitch.tv/burlybirdmedia. So please do consider checking that out. We have our live chat as well, and often we'll put questions out into our community on our Discord to get them to weigh in on our topics for the episode tonight. Well, let's dive straight in. Mike, let's readdress the balance of the life that we both face and the industry at large. There's been so many stories of closures, cutbacks, mismanagement, and projects getting binned. Great people that are creative not able to then express themselves and obviously secure themselves employment. There's just been a dearth of so many stories of people really, really struggling to find their way in the industry with all of the cutbacks and things happening. And this news about Moon Studios and No Rest for the Wicked confirming that they have in fact gone independent after Take-Two had binned off Private Division, their publishing house that were partnering with a lot of indie studios. There was a real concern, I think, that they were not going to survive as a result of these cuts, or that you'd find something like No Rest for the Wicked, currently in early access on PC, getting canned because they simply ran out of funding and wouldn't be able to complete their early access journey. As of right now, they're still very much iterating on the game. There's a big expansion coming out soon called The Breach, which looks really, really cool, adding a new biome, new enemies, and new story content. But the big news really from this is that because they've now secured their independence, they've been able to speak with more certainty about their future. And one major thing within that is the plans for the 4-player co-op, which is going to be the next major update after The Breach is released, as they work towards their 1.0 release, which will also see it arrive on console. This game has been on my radar for a long time. I think screams co-op. So I think the fact that we know that that's coming, and that has always been in their roadmap, it's just been undefined right now, is just a really exciting prospect. I think the art style is stunning. Gameplay is exactly the kind of thing you'd want from a top-down, very Diablo-esque kind of game. And I am just thrilled that these guys have been able to secure the win on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I loved the Ori games. I'm curious to see how it will work in co-op because it's very much the same style as Ori, and I don't think that would have. It's always very slow to move around, isn't it? The combat's, feels really refined, but it's you're kind of taking in the visuals as you move through the world, and I'll be interested to see what adjustments they have to make to have it work in co-op. But I've seen Phil Spencer playing Ori again, which is always interesting. Sometimes he plays things before like a new version or a new game from those studios come out, so it might be that it's not too far off that we get some news on a console release, hopefully. But I'm really pleased for the studio. They've always been very supportive of Xbox and have said nice things when Xbox is kind of struggling. They seem like one of the nice studios, as opposed to some of the indie studios kind of just say stuff to get headlines often, and it'll be negative things about PlayStation or about Xbox or whatever. So they seem like a good team. So
absolutely, and they've always struck me as actually in some ways being quite similar. Big Manny, good evening, good to see you in chat. They've always struck me as a team that actually they remind me in some ways of the relationship that PlayStation have with Arrowhead and Helldivers, because that as a second party studio that was making essentially, they were making exclusives. Both Ori games were PC, Xbox only for a long time before the one or both, I believe, got ported to Switch. But for many, many years, they were exclusively, and they were only really working with Xbox. And it gave me shades of Housemarque. Obviously now, the developers behind Returnal and Dead Nation, they are now obviously now owned by PlayStation. I always wondered if Moon Studios might end up being snapped up by Xbox. I just feel like what they did with Ori and a lot of those games kind of fit with their vision for Game Pass and what they're doing in that space. So the fact that actually on balance, after all is said and done, they've been able to actually now retain their independence after Take-Two's major cutbacks. It's just really exciting for that team that now I feel like has been able to now, well, they said it best, they can now feel like they can deliver the vision of what they wanted to achieve with this game through early access. And that was not a certainty. The closures at Private Division and the cutbacks from Take-Two did not imply job security for this team. There was a real possibility that this may not have gone as well as it has.
You'd like to think Xbox might have bought them in that situation, but it's not the sort of, well, they haven't made any acquisitions lately. It's not the sort of acquisition they've been looking for generally recently. So I definitely wouldn't assume anything. Have you played No Rest for the Wicked?
I haven't. No, I was actually waiting for it to be co-op to add that in before picking it up, but I was looking at maybe getting the PC version once they patched the co-op in to give it a try. I've got a couple of friends of mine who've been circling it, again, sort of holding off until the co-op patch is introduced. But it's definitely been on my radar off the back of the Ori games, which I adore. Just a great pedigree for a studio, lovely art style, and it's the kind of game I'm looking for right now. I think it's a good fit for where my head's at and what I'm hoping to play. So definitely one to watch for sure. And the Breach update coming now, which they did a big live stream reveal for recently, is fairly comprehensive in terms of its scope. Like I said to you before, they're adding that new biome, new enemy types, and new story content. So it's all signs point to it being positive right now for Moon Studios and what they're doing with that game. And we're just thrilled to see that they've been able to rise despite the challenges that they faced.
We talk about teams not over exerting themselves, and I think it's nice that they're focusing on getting the PC version to a state where they're happy. It's very unusual that you'd get like expansions and whole new features being added before it comes to console normally, or at least before the kind of full release of the game. So it's promising that they're trying to get it perfect before they do anything else with it.
Absolutely, making that console version definitive, which is really exciting there. So we also have, sort of switching gears now to EA. I feel like there's just been floodgates open on the new Battlefield game, which is currently in closed alpha testing with a very, very limited group. They're kind of playing whack-a-mole right now in terms of that footage and what it's being spread around on Reddit and online, etc. But they've been I've seen 20-minute chunks of gameplay coming out from what is obviously early. But my big takeaway from this, given how we talked previously about the importance of, we think them, you just mentioned it best there, about scale, but not trying to go too big. From what I've been taking from some of that footage that I've seen, it feels a lot like Battlefield 3 and 4. It feels like they've gone back that way. It looked very sort of with dense environments with lots of cover, focused lane-based combat, which is really nice to see, even with that sort of opened up play spaces. The destruction seems really good too. I don't think we're going to I think the finals is still going to be the gold standard, but it's certainly going to be improvement over 2042. I'm certainly feeling much more encouraged about Battlefield than I have been certainly in years. You and I both came to Battlefield 5 quite late in the game. It'd been out for several years before we really dove in. And that, I feel like they just perfected the template across visuals, map design, combat, all those elements and the classes all really came together. So if they can evoke some of the iteration they've done there and the success in that space, then they're onto a winner.
Yeah, if it launches and is as it appears, obviously with polish and stuff, in the leaked videos, I'd be all over it. The hope is that they don't just kind of get it to a stage where they're happy with and then add in loads of stuff. Stuff being things that you have in Call of Duty multiplayer, which I don't really want in Battlefield. It was nice seeing the menus and things. It was all very, you pick your class. There's not like a character model with all your customizations on. They're not doing emotes and stuff. I don't really want that stuff in Battlefield.
I agree.
Maybe basic stuff like, you say affirmative or thumbs up or do basic stuff, but I don't want them doing dances and things like that. It's just not for me in Battlefield. I think it needs to differentiate itself.
I found that really disengaging in Warzone, where you sort of see and Halo had the same issue. Characters with bunny ears and sort of it just almost like a bit of a joke. I know that they're, on the one hand, you don't need these games to be super serious necessarily. They, it's nice to have some levity, but equally, it does remove me from it when I see characters it's sort of basically sort of tapping into Fortnite, which Fortnite by design. It's a battle royale with that graphical style. Of course, it's going to embrace
Exactly.
silliness, and it fits that the world that they've built there, and the idea of it being this sort of bizarre meta crossover universe totally fits what they've built. Shoehorning that into other games is just that classic reactive problem that a lot of live service games have lived and died by because they feel like they have to emulate what Fortnite and Roblox are doing. And I don't need that in a
Yeah.
Battlefield game.
I'm pretty much fine with skins on guns, even the tags or whatever that you have hanging off the
Like
guns.
charms or something you get sometimes in
Different,
some. Yeah.
different coloured camos and things. But once people start wearing like costumes and things, it's too far. I mean, the gameplay looked really good. It looked weighty. It looked quite slow. I saw because they listed all the different movement things they're adding in. A few of them were in Battlefield 5. Some of them were talked about for 2042. The dragging someone into like that's been incapacitated was shown for 2042 and didn't make the game. So that's going to be in there, which is nice. But I was a bit worried that having the diving and stuff, although we had bits of it in 5, would make it too. Well, we've never been a fan of people being able to, bunny hop or whatever. It's always a bit of a risk once you put that stuff in, but it looks really weighty,
doesn't
and
it? Yeah, it looks heavy.
yeah,
And that's what that game needs for it to evoke the same feel of the games that really define the series. And actually having a sort of stripped back UI, not showing your character model and customization every 5 seconds, it's going to make it feel more like Battlefield 2 on PC. It's going to feel like those older titles because that's what I think people are hankering for. A simple, polished military shooter with the kind of tech and destruction that you've come to then expect from the Bad Company games onwards. And that's all they need to deliver with this.
it needs to be different enough to Call of Duty, and 2042 was just trying to be all the other shooters that are out there, which I can understand why they were going for it. Maybe 5 didn't make their money back or didn't make enough because I'm sure it was expensive to make. But like we said, they need to scale it back if it's costing too much and they can't make their money back, rather than trying to go after something that isn't at the core of what Battlefield is. Just scale it back and release something that the fans of the series actually want. They were going after the videos and getting them taken down, and then they stopped. So they're all on YouTube. You can just watch them now. I think
is that in response to the positive sentiment? Do you think?
I'm sure it is. Yeah, which
They've
is good
gotta
because this is what it should be. It should be, I use it as a marketing tool. And I'm sure that's part of what as much as it's all like, oh, well done, DICE for letting players play it early. Half of that is also it's a marketing tool because you want people playing it and talking about it on Reddit or whatever, and having gameplay footage on YouTube if it's going down well, which it seems to be, is just part of that. No reason to take them down if it's just free marketing.
Well, no, game. And I think if anything, if they from early doors they talked about the Battlefield Labs and the player input being fundamental to the development of the game. That's been said very early. You couple that with an unexpected PR win because people are really appreciating the footage and really thinking it's ticking those boxes. They're setting themselves up to succeed. All they need to, this though, we have to acknowledge the other side of it. The classic line that we've seen from EA, we never anticipated the demand when the servers crumbled. They have to have a good launch. There is no goodwill going into this Battlefield game at all. And I am surprised that the series hasn't been on hiatus longer.
Yeah.
I was expecting a much longer gap between whatever 2042 finished as to where we are now. There's a good chance that the next Battlefield could launch in the next 12 months. So
I think it will, especially with this sentiment, because maybe they wanted to see how this alpha lands, and then they could take longer if they had to pivot away from anything. But it seems like because it's landed so well, other than the single player, which is maybe going to take some time, it might not be that far away. I think they've probably seen that there's a gap in the market because it's literally Call of Duty that's a mainstream FPS now that's doing well, that's paid a premium FPS. Just Halo's not doing anything. Everything else, like Hell Let Loose and things like that, they're all kind of quite niche.
And I'd put Apex separate of that. Apex is much more sort of quick fire science fiction. It's very
I think
much
that, yeah, the free to play stuff is
yeah,
a different
space, isn't it?
category, I think.
Um,
So yeah, it's all looking positive.
It's another encouraging moment. There's been rumours, obviously, in terms of looking at some of Microsoft's now strategy, their multi-platform strategy. We've got Indie and Forza both apparently coming to PS5 in April. Forza, I believe, is confirmed now, isn't it? For Forza Horizon 5 is confirmed for that, but Indie is just still rumoured. It was given that vague release window of spring, which put it into Q2. So, between February and May, we're expecting that. Sort of March to May, sorry. So we'll see how that plays out. I think certainly won't be the last. We've now seen that floodgates are open. There is, I think. Go on.
I can guarantee that Forza will go to the top of the PlayStation charts. I don't think they'll want Indie to be too close to Forza, because it is just going to destroy everything.
I think hold it
for
back
a while.
for like end of May, because then you've got Forza PS5, Doom at the start of May, and then have your Indie port at the end of the month. A great start to the year for Microsoft in terms of
funny.
Yeah.
Well, funny to have Microsoft having to think about their release cadence on PlayStation.
What a weird thing for us to even be talking about. I know, and that we've even said that following. And there's evidence, Sea of Thieves had such a barnstorming response on PlayStation. It was top of the PlayStation Store when it dropped. That it's likely we'll see the same thing. It's validating the strategy, and they'll go where the money is. So
it will, more than Sea of Thieves, I think it will give a resurgence to Forza Horizon on Xbox as well. Although it's still pretty high up in the most played charts, I think it will jump back up again with people streaming it on PlayStation and talking about it,
playing with their friends on different platforms.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for them, and I do wonder if this great experiment, these walls coming down, will. And now I think, because PlayStation are in a strange place right now in terms of their first party and their strategy, it's pivoted back to their traditional approach. They've certainly been embracing PC in a way that's more profound than they have done in the past, with much shorter windows between games coming out on PC and getting ported. So it's just a very strange time for the industry, and this great experiment that's happening from Microsoft is, in some ways, we haven't really acknowledged actually how much of a Hail Mary some of this is for them. I think there is quite a sort of a swing there, which actually brings us nicely onto some of the rumours around next gen with Xbox, that we're apparently looking at a branded collaborative handheld device that's got Xbox branding and potentially Windows UI in it. Looking for this year. There's been rumours of that circulating, that we're going to get that, and that next gen will indeed have a Series X successor console, something very specifically in that arena, a home console with a Xbox branded and also in-house made handheld to follow their iterative attempt in 2025. This is sort of falling into line with what we were looking at, and I think all of our conversations before about the need for the hardware to be appropriately differentiated now. If you're going to put your games everywhere, and I could just buy a PlayStation and play Xbox games on there, make your subservice unmissable, make your hardware a significant leap over what PlayStation are doing to justify why you'd want to buy it, beyond just your backwards compatibility in your library, which definitely has value for people, and beyond the controller, which again for a lot of people do determine their brand preference because of the controller they've decided they like best, and the direction of those thumbsticks. That can often be the determining factor. But I think these rumors are pretty credible. Interesting how I saw Jez Corden from Windows Central talk about how it's 2027 that we'd be looking at next gen starting at the 26 is a fairly unlikely thing. I do feel the current gen consoles may be creaking a little bit on the power side, because even the PS5 Pro is not that big of a leap in real terms. PSSR, which we'll come to later, is doing a lot of the heavy lifting there. So given where they're at in the PC space, it would be interesting to see how necessary next gen becomes, especially with some of these games we haven't seen. I saw rumours earlier today, actually it's not in our itinerary, but I saw some rumours around State of Decay 3 being further along than people think, that it actually might be, we could be getting a gameplay look at that. So yeah, what are you thinking about this strategy from them? Because this is looking more and more likely to be how this plays out.
I think it explains why some people were saying there was going to be a native handheld this year because they probably heard about this because it's going to have an Xbox button on it apparently, and
Yeah.
it's going to be Xbox branded, which on one side is potentially confusing, I think, for casual consumers, but I don't see it as a massive issue. Though what happens exactly when you press the Xbox button, I guess it brings up the app running in Windows. But it's a good way to test the water and see how it sells. As for the next gen, I think the problem with 26 is just the cost. If you're trying to make something better than the PS5 Pro, I think the PS5 Pro is basically, they're not going to be making much, if anything, on that. Which is why, because it's badly priced, and I don't think they would have priced it like that if they had wiggle room to do anything different, and cutting the disk drive out and things like that. So I think rather than they could build an amazing console and release it, well, they could release it now, but it would be like $2,000. So I think the problem is they need to wait until it's cheap enough to do.
Yeah, some of those components have dropped.
Mass appeal. Yeah. So which I think is probably why it's looking like 27 instead of next year.
Yeah. It's funny too because I look at how I've used my Switch and certainly how I'm planning to use Switch 2, probably mostly docked. It will probably be more of a home console than a handheld. But there have been more and more times where I've sat there thinking I don't really want to get my phone clip out. I'd quite like to, on the sofa or in bed, play some Xbox, even just for half an hour on a handheld. I've had more and more...
Yeah, this is interesting. So it should probably be a deep dive for the future. But
yeah,
if you had a choice of a Series X successor or a handheld that's effectively Series, not Series S specs, but weaker than Series X.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to buy both because they're both going to be, £400 plus. What would you go for?
I'd still go for the home console. I think I'd still that's where my base is, and that's because I built my library on there, and having that, that's why I got the PS5 Pro. I on my console experience, I want to be the best version I can get. So I think that's why I went the X over the S. That's why I went for the Pro and traded up. So I think I would go that way for sure. But I am, I have wondered how I'm going to potentially get into the Xbox ecosystem from a handheld perspective, and that maybe Switch 2 ends up being something I use more handheld than I have done previously. I think my Joy-Cons are broken and I never replaced them, and it made me angry. So there's an element of that where I just then didn't. The Switch was already becoming a home console for me, and then the Joy-Cons breaking and me not wanting to be too stubborn to replace them, I think just solidified that. But I'm finding more and more like I've got back into reading now. I want to not always be in my desk and in my office. I'd like sometimes perhaps to just be in the living room or upstairs in bed, going to bed a bit earlier and having a little half an hour on something. I think that suddenly is more interesting to me than it was. But I think I just don't believe necessarily that the cloud infrastructure is quite there yet. I've done some interesting shit tests on stuff out and about using the streaming. It is impressive. I've heard that the PS Portal as well, I don't have it, but my friend Johnny Wilson is a big fan of the PS Portal and it works well for him. But even he's noticing that there is that, he can feel the latency still. It's just not, the infrastructure just isn't quite there on the streaming side yet. So whatever handheld they do, I'd like it to be native. I'd like there to be a native offline, like the Steam Deck. I'm
sure
that's what I want.
I think given Xbox is going in the PC direction and it's popular, that format is popular with the PC community, I think it's just logical that they go that way. What I think is less obvious is whether PlayStation, because we're assuming they're going to also do a native handheld, but with Portal being successful and probably most of the stats suggesting that people are playing stuff at home rather than out and about.
Yeah.
Whether it makes more sense for Sony to just focus on their high-end box and do Portal, a new version of Portal.
Yeah. Iterate on Portal like they did with PSVR 2.
Yeah, it would be very saturated if we have three, PC handhelds, Xbox handheld, PlayStation handheld, Nintendo handheld,
and Switch. I mean,
all
it's
at the same time.
Yeah, and that's not even then factoring in things like the ROG Ally and those and the ones with like the you insert your phone into the holder with the controllers at either end. That this is becoming a very, very packed marketplace, and Nintendo backed away from having the two separate, their development teams separated between a dedicated handheld and a home console platform. They've cycled all their efforts into one device. So there's definitely a consolidation happening there, but suddenly Xbox, PlayStation, off the back of, I think, Steam Deck, I think more than Switch, has been the driver for them, and seeing the response to that, having a native device that might support streaming, because I think you can have the Xbox Game Pass app on there, or at the very least use a browser to log in. So there's a device that supports streaming as an option, but I certainly would want it to be a native. I want to be playing on that device.
Yeah.
I would not want a streaming-only handheld, especially for that kind of cost. Even if I'm just at home, I think I'd still want the native experience, and that's always been just generally my preference. That's not to say that cloud won't get there. I'm sure as internet speeds continue to improve and the infrastructure gets better, and what they're doing on their end in terms of the server blades and that tech improving, we are going to see that gap closing and getting shorter and shorter, to the point where probably we won't even notice really any latency. There is a future there, isn't there, where it might not be this gen, but we're on the cusp of them being able to deliver something that is almost as good as a native offline experience. So
yeah, it depends. Like at home on your Wi-Fi is one thing, but like on the train, it's just like I try to do emails on the train. It's just impossible because the Wi-Fi goes in and out if you're going over any sort of distance. Like, and that's for me is 10 years plus away from being fixed. In the UK, where we've got a very small landmass, but in some of the big European countries, in America, I imagine the Wi-Fi is just non-existent unless we get Starlink everywhere for big parts of the country. So,
right.
Yeah. So yeah, it has to, like you say, it has to be native. And for me, I will be disappointed if the next Xbox doesn't have Steam on it. I think it has to be a PC-based console, and they move away from it being a native console, but it's a PC basically with the Xbox OS on is for me absolutely the direction they should go in. And if you've got Steam and the ability to play almost any game except for PlayStation and Nintendo exclusives, but you'll also be able to play some PlayStation games probably that come to PC, that would be massive, right? And a real differentiation.
Well, I have my little vision for next gen was a modular console, one that you could upgrade, and very much leaning into the PC flexibility, but it's not the same hands-on installing it. It's very much like taking sort of inspiration from the expansion cards you get for Series X and S, where you're just upgrading the memory, literally like a memory card. I think it being expandable and modular could be a really interesting differentiator for them with a Steam PC interface.
It would be a nice way for them to have it launch and not be prohibitively expensive. But there needs to be, because I think most consoles have always had one thing that they've had that's been weak and they've been holding it back, like whether it's RAM or graphics card. So if they can identify the most expensive part of the console and kind of scale it back a bit, but have it be expandable, then that would be ideal. But obviously you can't expand everything, so some stuff's just not possible. So it'll be interesting to see. It's a nice idea and a good way to keep the cost down.
Yeah, and see how that looks. Basically, I think what I really want is the N64 expansion pack, which changed my life and let me play Donkey Kong 64 in about 15 frames a second. But it was amazing.
And people say it'll be too confusing if you've got stuff split across SKUs, games that you can't play. But that was a thing then. It had on the box. You need the expansion pack to play, and it was bundled in with the first game that came with it.
I feel like that. Yeah, exactly. And I think that Majora's Mask had the same thing. I believe it was a bundle of that, Donkey Kong, and also there was Banjo-Tooie. I believe also had. There was a bundle you could get in there. I would look at something like that, and I think that the answer to the complexity of it is that it's one SKU. You're buying the Xbox. And that is definitely an advantage that they had with PlayStation, is that even whether it was digital or disc, you are getting the same PlayStation for that. Yeah,
but then if it's expandable, it makes it people are on different SKUs, aren't they? That's the trouble.
Yeah, I think it's more just the notion of it starting with the same base, and then it can be expanded from there. That I think is more digestible for a lot of people than figuring out like, oh, can I run this game, or does this feature run on here? So it's interesting.
To be honest, if you remove the disk drive, that's not a problem anymore because the Xbox Store tells you you can run this game, you can't run this game.
Yeah.
So that's that problem
Yeah.
gone,
Immediately,
basically.
isn't it?
Other than the marketing side, you're showing someone a trailer and there's like, can I play this? Can I not play this?
Mm,
Confusing from that point of view, but they're not wasting money and having to get stuff refunded that they can't play,
exactly.
um, except on Steam, I guess. But
No, it's a
it's
good point.
not a big deal.
But if it's well integrated, all of those processes would be something that's you just carried over. They're already well embedded there. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, definitely interesting stuff. We've also just switching gears now to PlayStation. Mark Sony mentioned that I think the headline feature, and certainly the one that I've noticed as the biggest impact and in terms of the upgrade, is the use of PSSR, which is their sort of super resolution approach where they're upscaling games to be in 4K or like 4K, much like their initial checkerboard approach they used to take with the Horizon and the original Death Stranding games. This is something that they think they're partnered with AMD. It's the FSRM, or I might have got that acronym wrong. Yeah, which is going to be rolled out through PS5 Pro, which actually shows me that again they're not going to be. That sort of actually gave credence to the idea that next gen won't be till 27, because they're still looking at making upgrades to PS5 Pro and having that be the testbed for that, which you'd assume then would roll out when their next gen's ready to launch. It's the headline feature of my PS5 Pro, and in some games, especially some of the first party, so like The Last of Us Part 2 remastered, that re-release of that game is absolutely stunning in that, playing that at 60 frames smoothly. And then if you've got a TV like I have, which just has the variable refresh rate, it allows it to kick it. I mean, I was able to play some of the no return multiplayer mode at like 90 frames per second, which is really impressive at that resolution. So it feels so responsive, and the latency was almost non-existent. It was like down to about 3 or 4 milliseconds. And I've got a screen that you'd assume would be, slower, and it's just because of its heft. So it's just a really, really cool piece of technology that I'm glad to see them continue to iterate on and continue to push. And it's all bets are off as to where this is going to lead in terms of next gen. They may end up as a cost-cutting measure, lowering the quality of the innards in their box and relying more on these upscaling methods as they're looking cleaner and creating more realistic upscales of 4K. They might end up leaning more into this tech if it's proving to pay off for them.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting because the danger with that is that your competitor could, even if they're kind of equal at launch, or you've got the better version of the upscaling tech at launch, Xbox could come out with a better one in 2 years' time, mid-gen, that's much better than yours. And then if they've also got a hardware advantage, you're being some trouble. But
foot.
I think PSSR is. I think the problem is the games where, like in some games, it runs worse than base PS5, and it's just inexcusable when you're spending that amount of money. It feels as though, as usual with this sort of thing, for first party stuff, it's massively impressive, and they've obviously spent a lot of time making sure it works really well on their own games. But the third parties have to adopt it and they have to implement it properly, or it's a bit of a mess. So if this solves those problems and takes away some of the criticism, like Digital Foundry have been quite critical of the PS5 Pro, I think it can only be a good thing. And yeah, it definitely makes sense as kind of a test bed for getting it ready for next gen, where it's going to be in front of millions of people instead of the numbers that PS5 Pros probably had.
It'll be a headline feature of that next gen if they've proven viability now with the PS5 Pro. The other side of this, of course, is that Xbox do have a history of leveraging software-based compatibility improvements. We've seen that with the Xbox 360 library, but also FPS boost. Huge thing. That's the list of that. I was looking at that the other day. It's quite a library. It's over hundreds of games that have been FPS boosted that have either gone from 30 to 60 or 60 to 120. So there is precedent for them using their own software engineering and their own approach to backwards compatibility and improving games. There is some expertise on Xbox's R&D side as well. So that could be an interesting battleground between them. It's sort of, even if their console innards aren't quite the leap on paper that each gen previously has shown, that they could now leverage things like cloud infrastructure and stuff like PSSR to really close the gap on PC. And what a smart play to keep consoles relevant from a tech point of view.
It'll be a nice point of difference between the two consoles if they take slightly different or using different technology for this? Because all too often at the moment it's you can barely tell the difference between games on both platforms, which I guess is good in a way, but I think has led to this point where Xbox and PlayStation are very, very similar.
It's so interchangeable, I think, in so many ways. And then you look at the games now being released for, either across PC or now indeed on console. Oh, hi. Oh, it's always great to get some... always great to get... You fancy moderating that?
Yeah, I'll get to it.
Always great to get some. So those of you listening to the video on demand version, always nice to get a drop in of a spam bot every now and then. That's always a treat. Well, given how we opened tonight's episode, looking at No Rest for the Wicked, and Moon Studios is retaining their independence and fighting for that, we thought we'd bookend the show tonight with also some jolliness and positivity, because one of our... it's a Game of the Year contender for me already. Split Fiction from Hazelight Studios has already hit 1 million sales in 48 hours, which is an incredible milestone. Their concurrent player count is 2/3 the numbers that It Takes Two did. Their current peak, which is fantastic, over 200,000 players versus their 70,000. So it's launched incredibly strong. It Takes Two hit recently a 20 million sales milestone, so that's 40 million players with the Friend Pass. And all signs point to Split Fiction having equally as long a tail. So just shout out to Joseph Fares and Hazelight and those guys, keeping it a focused, tight experience, which is really great to see. We obviously have played now the first sort of hour or so and having an absolute blast with it. I mean, it's ticking so many boxes in terms of feel, variation, story, graphics. It's really landed well, and I'm thrilled to see this team find this success. We kind of wanted to use that success as a framing device for our deep dive tonight in terms of where do they go from here. A Way Out, It Takes Two were very, very different games, but It Takes Two to Split Fiction feels a bit more iterative, I think, in many ways. Not as a criticism, but I do think it was more... This feels like it's really perfected that formula of the constant variation, the simple story, but it being very mechanically driven. I kind of wanted to use tonight as a part of our deep dive just to explore where we go from here. Because given the sales success and the rampant critical response they've had, and I imagine EA are chuffed. I imagine for EA Originals it's done the business for them too. Yeah. What's next, do we think, for them? I very much hope we maintain this two-player, mandated experience. I think they can say confidently now that they are experts in this field. But in terms of tone, storyline, what would you like to see from Hazelight explore next?
Yeah, I think what I would like and what they will do are different things. I think it would be cool if they went for more than 2 players. As much as I dislike it when you're forced to play with 3 or 4, because I think 2 is the best co-op number. It would be nice if they found a way to, if you've got 2 kids or both parents and a kid want to play, there's a way to do that, because Joseph Fares always talks about it's like his family, and the characters in this are based on his daughters, and it's all the reason he wants to make co-op games is because of his family and the feeling of playing with family often. But most families there's more than 2 people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think looking at that and a way to do that where you're not destroying the ability for 2 people to play, that would be quite a challenge, but interesting to see how they can do that. I personally would like... So A Way Out was more... There wasn't this constant variation, like you said. It was a cinematic, but it wasn't that cinematic, so it's a bit ropey. But the gameplay made sense, and it was following a storyline. I think the storyline in It Takes Two was criticised somewhat unfairly. Split Fiction, the storyline for me is also a bit weak in that it's not the centre of the game. It gives you quite a weak device, premise to justify what's going on, which is jumping between 2 ridiculous.
In some ways,
worlds.
actually, the de-emphasis on that is serving it well. I think that sort of.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is in based on the gameplay that there is here, but I would like to see a really cinematic co-op experience, because we you and I, who love playing co-op games together, what have we played that is that cinematic co-op experience in the
Right.
last couple of gens that just we haven't had it. It's all been either something like Rainbow Six Extraction, which we love, but
Mhm.
there's no story to that. You're just playing levels, or It Takes Two as an obvious highlight, but it's almost part of it is like Mario Party. Part of it is like the levels are so distinct, they're not linking from one to another. It's like you're now playing the whatever DIY level, you're now playing the space level, you're now
Mm,
playing it's not the cinematic thread that you had in A Way Out, and a part of me would like to see that come back.
nice.
I think they may go for something similar to what we've seen, but it would be nice if they increase the scope to try to accommodate more players. I think that would be cool.
Nice. I hear you on that. I certainly would like something with a little bit more narrative choice in it. I would love to see them
Be cool.
embrace, yeah, going down, especially if there was a mechanic in A Way Out that I didn't really don't remember seeing in It Takes Two, and we haven't seen in Split Fiction, where you could decide at critical points where to go, and they're going up on the bridge or underneath, and it would change. It wasn't necessarily that you'd then asymmetric that. It was actually that both players would have to go down that route, and it's something that I've seen a few co-op games do. Gears of War has a really nice mechanic with that, where you choose which direction you're going to travel in through a particular level. Gives it some replay value, but also I think it gives a bit more player agency. I'd love to see that with dialogue choices and perhaps a bit more sort of like forks in the road kind of moments. I think that could be really interesting for them to explore, because some of the most memorable stuff from games like Mass Effect were always those narrative choices that if you've got a really rich world and well-acted characters, which they do, to be fair, the mocap is great, the voice acting's always been really cool. I mean, can't knock Dr. Hakim from It Takes Two. I mean, one of the best characters ever. I'd like to see that a bit more narrative agency and choice. Not so much so that they're not telling us a story, because, like you said, you don't want to sacrifice that cinematic aspect that A Way Out definitely lent into. But I would like to see a little bit more player choice within that, to keep that
Yeah,
engagement.
and the benefit of that is even if it was two-player, there's replayability, so you
Yeah.
can just play it with one child, and then you could play it with another one and change. You could be the different character.
Mm,
'Cause in It Takes Two, the replayability is you'd have to switch characters basically, because then you're playing kind of the bits that you didn't play from your
yes.
first time through. But yeah, if there's a bit of choice and agency, it would be nice to have that as a reason to play. I also think, I don't know if it's a negative, but sometimes in It Takes Two, as one of the players, you're looking at the tool that the other player has got and thinking, "I wish I had that." There's sometimes
Envy, like
the
tool envy.
asymmetrical
Yeah.
nature of the game, yeah, is such that one player's got the thing that the other person wants. It would be nice if there was, so they give a gun to player A and the player B has a sword, that you could swap them. You could choose to swap
Mm.
them in the game. Would be nice
So
because
you still retain the asymmetric gameplay, but you could just say, like in the sequence we just played in Split Fiction, you have that sort of grapple whip, and I have the
yeah.
sword. And I think if we could do like a quick swap, mainly to stop our shittiness to each other, like us messing with each other, but I think that could be quite fun to do. Like yeah, that's interesting. Swap it,
Also,
a bit
if
more
like
player
one
choice.
player one player can't do a certain bit, then you can
Yeah,
swap your equipment round.
yeah, yeah.
And I don't think there's any reason really in It Takes Two why you wouldn't have been able to do that. It was like Cody has to press this button. It's like, why? It's just a button. Like anyone should be able, you should be able to press that one, and May
Hmm.
should be able to press the other one. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
like that
that
there's
that
a baseline of skills that they've got for a Split Fiction now, which is really nice. They've both got a dash, a double jump, that and the sort of double tap it to roll. There's a baseline set there, which is really nice, beyond just sprinting and jumping, which is what they had previously. So I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. But I agree. I think it just centers on choice then. Give us more choice over the story, but also just some of the mechanics, having that ability to swap those asymmetric abilities. I think it's a nice concept for sure.
Yeah, I mean, as we talk about it, I feel like I would, and with like we've both got children that are growing up, having it even more focused on like family playthrough
Yeah.
would be nice, because a lot of the Nintendo games that are co-op, there isn't a story to them, or the
Hmm.
story is very basic to the extent that a child wouldn't be interested in it, um, or wouldn't be engaged by it. Like having even a child as a character, um, or a selector, like being able to choose different characters would be nice. And I get that they're very focused on getting the mocap right and really strong voice acting. And the more characters you add, the harder that becomes. But at the like It Takes Two, where you've got basically a husband and wife, and if you're not playing it through as a husband and wife, it's a bit weird sometimes. Split fiction with 2 female characters, which is fine, but if it was like 3-player, being able to just having the ability to kind of choose a character that fits you better, I think is always nice, especially if it's a more cinematic game where you're trying to role play. Not so much of an issue in It Takes Two and Split Fiction.
That would be a logical iteration for me that would allow them to retain the focused scope, which is that now they've got the variation in the mechanics. They've developed that and iterated on that so well, is that actually they turn their focus and attention to the characters themselves. How much customization we can have over not only the choice of character, but how the characters look, sound, and how what they say with their dialogue choices. I think that would be a lovely way to maintain variation and variance within their design whilst keeping it still appropriately scoped and not balloon too big.
Well, and talking about your character agency, it's quite a classic thing where the character you choose can get to different parts of the level. So you maybe there's 4 characters and 2 of them are children. If you choose one of the children, they can get into smaller holes in the level and get to different bits.
That kind level of design. Yeah,
that would be quite nice.
Nice. Well, thanks so much everyone for tuning in to this latest episode of System Link for Wednesday, the 12th of March. 2025. You can find us on all of the things, Threads, Facebook, Instagram, and also YouTube, Podbean, Spotify, and our Discord server at Burly Bird Media. Please do consider jumping in, checking out our community. We always have some really jolly discussions going on in our Discord, but also our YouTube channel is host to our various shows, including Burly Bird Live, which we stream live every Saturday. Mike and I are playing something. We never quite know until the day often what we're going to be streaming, but it's always something jolly. And also we have new episodes of our various podcast shows going up on Mondays on our YouTube channel. We have some really fun interviews coming up. The next one being published will be our John Billingsley interview. Our Some Drivel podcast will be launching with that, which will be really good, so please do check that out. But also we have new episodes of our various shows. Tag and Bag, which is our podcast with the legendary Jeff Steitzer, the voice of Halo, the Halo multiplayer announcer, but also Dulcet Tones, our performing arts podcast. We've just shot another episode of that with the legendary Stephen Murray, the voice of the Knockout City DJ, so please do consider diving in and having a look at those. Legendarily as well, I've just managed to book in another episode of Burly and a Teat. 2 dads, little generation, just chewing the fat, navigating life. We've got another silly Burly and a Teat coming up where, and I'm happy to share this, we will be discussing Burly's vision for next generation gaming. That will be our pitch for the episode, so please set your expectations appropriately. Mike, where can people find you? TheXboxGuide.com. So there's a the February Game Pass review is up now, so check that out. And on social at the Xbox Guide. Fantastic. Well, thanks again everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Oh, wait, before I sign off, I've just seen something in the chat. Big Manny, I was mid-outro there. Big Manny subscribed for 7 months to the channel with Prime. Thank you so much, dude. That is legendary. And now I can do my outro, folks. We will see you next time.
See ya.